All right, and welcome into another episode of the Young Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Jay. Whether you're outside grilling, mowing the lawn, maybe you're just laying on the couch letting the kids run wild, or maybe you're cooking a delicious dinner, or breakfast, or lunch, who knows? Or maybe you're just waiting in the pickup line, drop off line. I don't know. But whatever you're doing, however you're dadding right now, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Super excited to be with you today. Today I have Junaid, the Lemonade Man, with me, joining me from the East Coast. Junaid's a father of four, podcaster, blogger, does all the things that us content creators do in this space. Super excited to have him with me. How are you doing today, man?
AJ, I'm doing great. Super excited to be here as well. I don't know if I can call myself a young dad. I am a teenager's dad.
Hey,
I guess I'm a teenage dad.
it's all good. Did it just hit you that you're a teenager, Dad?
Yeah, it did.
It's crazy. It's crazy. They get older, we get older, and we don't even realize that both are happening at the same time, really. It's crazy. But welcome to the show, man. Before we get started, I just want to take care of a little bit of housekeeping, a little bit of business here at the top. Real quick little shout out to our opening sponsor of the podcast. It's For Fathers Apparel. If you listen to the podcast for any amount of time, if you follow me on Instagram for any amount of time, you know that I love For Fathers Apparel. What the team over at For Fathers did is they set out to make some amazing dad themed polos because there wasn't a line that existed to fit the dad lifestyle before Forefathers. So what they did is they took all our favorite dadism, donuts with dad, baseball with dad, swimming, golfing, turf dad, all the different dadisms that you can think of, meat sweats, movie night, 5 o'clock somewhere. They designed them and they printed them on the best performing material and to fit the dad bod. They're light, they're breathable, they're comfy, they're conversation starters. They're so much fun. You can get yours right now from the link down in the description of the episode. Use the code YOUNGDAD, YOUNGDAD, to see if save 20%. It's going to be one of the best deals year round that you can get, and you'll be helping out the podcast a bunch by doing so. So, without further ado, that's enough of the housekeeping. Junaid, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do on social media, and a little bit about just your 13, 14 years of being a dad so far.
And it's a great opening, specifically on, what I've been doing for the past 14 years, essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Becoming a dad, it's a big step forward for sure. It's a first time realization to when you have a child. It's like, oh my God, I'm responsible for another party, another person. All the perspectives change completely on what you thought life was about. It's about other lives. It's about other people, really, right? And those other people, especially when they're your own kids, you think even more about them. So for the past 14 years, I've been, continuing to be a user experience designer. That's something that I've been doing for many, many decades. And for the past 8 years, I've been a podcaster. I've been behind camera. I've been in front of camera. I've been helping people set up their studios, helping them figure out technology for their YouTube content, for their courses. And it brings me a lot of passion because I have passion for photography and filmmaking for the past, 30 plus years. I was handed my first camera when I wasn't much younger. I wasn't even 14 when I got my first camera from my uncle. This was, a long time ago. And it just instilled that fire to understand technology and understand all the things, tech and photography and filmmaking. And I've gone into that passion as I discovered more about it, and I played with it more.
Very cool. So you started out behind the camera when you were 14. Was it just like an instant connection with that camera? Was it something that you just instantly fell in love with? And then have you done it like career-wise? Did you go to school for videography, cinematography, or anything like that?
Well, I did not go to school for photography or filmmaking. It was more of a passion.
Okay.
I don't even remember what I went to school for. I mostly did a lot of community classes and learning about it's all been passion driven, I think, from the beginning. Even learning to build computers, learning to assemble them, then learning to design flyers and websites and whatnot. And as I'm digging more into photography, what really changed, I think, was actually 10 or 11 years ago when my wife got me a DSLR camera for our anniversary. And I was like, oh my God, this is game changing. Now I have been using point and shoot cameras, film cameras, all sorts of cameras for a long time, just being an amateur. But when I got this pro camera, I was like, I got to be a pro. So I dug in. I took at least 14 different courses to understand how cameras work. How does light bend? How, like, all of those things were really important to me. Composing, understanding the lens, understanding the sensor, understanding like all of those things. The more I did it, the more I studied, the more practice I took with it, the better I got. So I would go to meetups, I would go to classes in person and shooting photos and watching other people and learning from them and implementing it. I even took Hollywood camera classes course. Basically talks about how in Hollywood do they set up these shots? How in Hollywood do they block the shot? What are the different shots? And then they have specific terms of close up, extreme close up, medium shot, the hip shot, the cowboy shot. Like all of these terminology is coming from film. And it just makes it a lot easier because now every filmmaker or a photographer, cameraman knows the terminology and they can go exactly to that shot as a director tells them, like, hey, I want a medium shot of these two people, blah, 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 and boom, it's going in there. So I brought all of those technologies and I brought all those things into my business that I've been engaged in for the past few years.
Very cool. So it's like its own language essentially then, with the
It absolutely
camera
is, yeah.
behind the camera. That's interesting. I didn't know that. I've always liked cameras, I've always liked taking pictures, but I've never been like into it at that
Yeah.
level. I didn't know there was such a deep level to all of it. I thought it was just click, throw it into Photoshop and edit it up a little bit and do it up. So that's interesting. So
Yeah.
you started podcasting, you said, and doing all this stuff about 8 years ago. How did you get into it? How did you fall into it? Because that's about 2 years after you got this camera from your wife for your anniversary.
Yeah. So how this happened was, as I mentioned earlier, I've been designing graphics, I've been designing web pages prior to jumping more into photography. And as somebody who learns technology, and if you look at it, right, for the past 18 plus years, we've had the iPhone. And it's come a long way. Now people, they start with the iPhone. They have so many apps in there, and you're continually learning the new apps that are being installed on the phones. So the same thing happened to me as I got introduced to computers. I was assembling computers, then I was designing on computers, graphic web pages. And as I'm creating this, I learned about blogging. And when you learn about blogging, I'm like, oh, I want to do blogs. So I've been blogging since 2004. And then as I'm blogging, you learn about podcasting. Podcasting came out around 2005, or maybe I think it came out in 2003 because we just passed the 21-year anniversary for podcasting itself.
Yeah, that's when it was like
And as I am
raw
learning
back
about
then.
this, I'm like, oh, I want to launch a podcast. And this was back in 2012. Well, I managed to launch a podcast with 4 episodes. It was me and 2 other co-hosts. And I was like, oh, this is so much fun, but it's so much more work than we thought it would be. Plus, we weren't in the same place. It would be a lot easier if I think we were in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
We were all remote. We didn't have tech like Riverside, StreamYard, Squadcast, Zoom. We didn't have any of this. But it was 2018, when I finished reading Gary Vaynerchuk's book, Crushing It.
I love that
And
book.
at the
Such
end
a
of the
good
book,
book.
it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the book, he's like, just document your journey. And I've been thinking I want to start my podcast. And I was like, oh my God, I can document my journey on a podcast. But what journey would it be? I don't know how to tell a story, because that's what I've kept thinking about. I don't know how to tell a story. He's like, just document your journey. And the journey that I was just on at that moment was beekeeping. I had just finished my beekeeping course. And there's a backstory to why beekeeping too. And it goes back to being a dad of a kid who has allergies to different foods. And it was, again, 2012, we had taken our son to an allergist, and as he's pricking his back with all the different foods and whatnot, he mentioned something around local honey and how it's really good for seasonal allergies. So I filed it away in my brain. And as time progresses, I'm learning about beekeeping here, beekeeping there. One of my friends had a 10-acre farm, and he wanted to rent some bees. He wanted to capture that moment. And of course, he knew me as a camera guy. So he's like, hey, can I borrow your GoPro that I can attach it to my hat? And as I'm bringing these bees in, I was like, sure. So now all these questions are coming in my mind. So 2018 or end of 2017, I finally jumped on board to a class, took the class, and then started documenting my journey through the podcast. So short answer, long answer.
I love it.
That's what inspired me to get into podcasting and, document my journey, and what inspired me to get there.
I love that. So it's interesting. Even bees are part of that mix, but it's so interesting hearing different people's like reasons why, how they got into it, how they fell into it, and it can start
Yeah.
with something so simple with just, an itch or an inclination to be creative. Maybe someone that they were close with said, "You should start a podcast." And so they're like, "Of course I should start a podcast." Kind of thing. And that's a long time to be in the podcast field, 8+ years, and to be doing it. I'm sure it's changed a lot. Like you said, this technology barely existed. Riverside was barely a thing when I started about 2+ years ago. Like, it was barely getting off the ground. Like, it did not
Yeah.
have, like, people who log into it today with the full integration into Spotify for podcasters and everything. Like, I was on Anchor recording audio. Like, this thing
Exactly.
only had an audio feature. It didn't even have the video feature yet. Like, it was young, it was raw, it didn't have anything that you see on it today. The soundboard, the text, the script, the teleprompter, the share screen, didn't have any of this. It was just audio. It was nuts when I started. That was just 2 years ago. To see the transformation in 2 years is insane. But it's interesting how this all started for you, because you mentioned a couple times that there were some family aspects of it. There was some parts of it that started with your kid. And, I can really relate to the part that you mentioned, that to just document your story. And that's what you started doing. You just started documenting a story. And a lot of the reason that I started this podcast was to get back on my feet creatively. But a lot of it was to be able to share my blueprint, to share what worked for me, to share things that I was going through or that I had gone through, to help
Yeah.
the next man who was maybe going through a divorce, now co-parenting, that had a rough, toxic relationship before, that was going through and navigating life, just as a single dad now, and then going through life, now. I mean, this podcast has really covered a pretty full spectrum over the last 2 years plus of my life, going from single and, a single dad to now I'm remarried, and just that spectrum that's happened over the last couple of years. So if you're a long-time listener, thank you. You know the story well and good at this point. But it's interesting how these things come to be, because we're just trying to share a story. We're just trying to share our story. and to put it out to the universe to hopefully help someone else. You know, things come along that
100%,
help
man.
with that, and business opportunities come along with that. But in the end, it's really just to share a story, share ourselves, to satisfy an itch that we have, more or less.
100%, man. I totally agree, and that's why it's almost like synonymous to blogging. It was Seth Godin who said, podcast guesting is the new form of guest blogging.
Yeah,
And I was like, what? What is guest blogging? You could go and write on other people's blogs. Like, I didn't even know there was a thing of that. I just knew that I had to, I was creating content for my own blog posts. But apparently there was a whole thing where you would guest blog. And now it totally makes sense, because how else do you keep continuing to create new content? You do need more people to be able to do that. And that's what I've discovered after interviewing over 500 guests on my own podcast. I'm like, wow, I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't have people coming in, sharing their stories and teaching me along the way.
100%. And blogging is so interesting. Like, I've been blogging since I was probably for 10 plus years now, between random
Mm-hmm.
different blogs, random different things I started in college and had to do
Yeah.
for assignments, but I always loved it. I always, always, always loved writing, even going back to high school. I would write short stories, and whenever it was an essay time, I would get so excited for essays because I would just overcompensate and write way more than I needed to, go into way more
Mm,
detail, do way more research. Like, I loved writing. Always loved writing. Then blogs, this was probably 2000. When did I really start? 2000, I don't know, probably 2010, 2012-ish, somewhere around there,
sure.
when I really started doing like my first vlogs and stuff. That's like a teenager kind of. And they're terrible. I still have links to some of them. They're terrible. They still live on the internet. They're terrible. And then I look back at the ones I made in college. They're terrible. And now I have a whole website. And if you look at my website, you can go back to stuff I posted. I don't even know when my first post is up on that website. I have like,
Mm-hmm.
because now my website encompasses, it's crazy to see how my website evolved. Because it first started out as just like a baseball blog, right? Ball boy blog. That's what I first started out as. And
Mm-hmm.
my writing was terrible. Like, everyone's a critic and everyone critiqued it. They're like, oh, this is so cool, but this, and this is wrong with it. I'm like, well, of course, and that's going to be wrong. So that was probably 4, 5 years, maybe even 5 years ago, 6 years. I don't know how long I've had that up for.
Yeah.
But I've had this site forever. And so
I
it's,
think
go ahead.
I think what's amazing about having so much bad writing out there is that the only way to go is up. Seth Godin talks about people would come up to him and they would say, "Hey, I want to write a best new." And Seth Godin would ask him, "Well, where's your bad writing? If you want to be a New York bestseller, where's your bad writing? Because you got to have some kind of writing inclination. You can't just become a writer out of the blue. You have to be writing something
Yeah.
that people are consuming, or even your practice, like you're putting in the reps of writing."
hmm Yeah, like my rep started in October of 2020. That's when
Nice.
it very first started, at least on this website is when it first started. I think I was using, um, what was it? Blogspot was before
Blocks.
Blogger. And I was using Blogger before this, and it was not good. But before that, I was even doing blogs. I think I've been doing Blogger because that's where I first started, was way back
Mm-hmm.
then on Blogger. So will I be able to find that? I hope not. I don't want to find that.
Totally get that.
But no, it's totally right to how these things have transformed over time, to where we went from blogging to guest blogging. Like, that was a big thing, and like everyone was like, oh, blogs are kind of a big deal, to where people were making legit
Yeah.
money off their blogs, just like sharing their opinions, sharing their stories, sharing their experiences. Everyone was doing that. That's basically what a blog was. It was kind of just like your
Yes.
running journal. And then it turned into podcasting. I don't think a lot of people really liked podcasting at the time because it would conflict with their radio listening or their TV watching or things like that. Like it would take up that
Yeah.
airtime. That's before we got so busy as a culture to where now we always have
Yeah.
headphones in listening to something wherever we're doing or whatever we're doing kind of thing. We just needed that noise because there's so much to consume. We find all the different ways to do it. Uh, and so it's transformed. But now, yeah, guest appearances are something I love inviting other people. Like I'm always down to return the favor, but like I love when I love all the people I come on like this podcast when it still be going 160, 170, however many episodes are going to be out by the time this podcast comes out, this one we're doing right now. But it wouldn't be because of all the people and like continuing to make connections, people continuing to put themselves out there. And it's so important to put yourself out there. Everyone has a story.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to share it. Maybe it's not time and place yet. Maybe you're not ready yet. But if you're starting to feel ready, like share your story. Find a place to share your story because your story, like I mentioned not too long ago, may be the blueprint for someone else and what they're going
Yeah.
through. There's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new under the sun. Everyone's been through the same thing that you're going through. Not everyone. Sorry, that's wrong. But there's someone out there that's been through something 80% similar. I'll use the 80-20 rule here. I live and breathe and die by the 80-20 rule, it seems, on this show. But someone out there has been through something about 80% similar to what you're going through. Share that story. Share how you got through it. Because that may get them through it. For me, that's what happened. Craig hosted a Single Dad reboot. He just, dusted off the mic, got back behind it, started podcasting again. His story got me through what I was going through. Before him, someone else's story got him through what he was going through. He inspired me to share my story about what I went through, how I got through it. That's become the Young Dad podcast. Now we're sharing hundreds of stories about hundreds of different topics to help people just get through their everyday.
It's amazing, man. Kudos to you for bringing on so many guests and having an open platform so that other dads can share their stories with your audience.
Yeah. Well, it's important, right, to not be afraid of that conversation piece. Because if we shy away from quote unquote hard conversations, let's say we shy away from conversations about politics or religion or relationships or those are kind of like the big three, or LGBTQ plus. Let's say we shy away from the big three: religion, politics, and gender and sexual orientation. If we shy away from those conversations, then if we're shying away with them, even listening to podcasts about them, then we're never going to feel comfortable enough as dads to have that conversation later with our kids about these things. If we're uncomfortable with the conversation, we're never going to have the conversation with them. And if we never have these conversations with them, guess where they're going to get their information from?
Wrong places.
They're going to get it from their peers. They're going to get it from Dr. Google. They're going to get it off TikTok from some influencer who doesn't know his ass from the hole in the ground, or hers, or theirs, or whoever. But they're going to get it from someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, who's not qualified, who can't do legit research like you can. And then we're stuck in a cycle to now they're going to believe anything because they don't stand for anything, because you as a dad didn't want to have a conversation with them. We wanted to have a conversation with them. We probably should have. We need, it's not even a should. You have to have these conversations with your kids. Every conversation, every big conversation, little conversation should be coming from within the home with your kids, because you're their best source of information. You're the place that they're going to want to listen to the most. Even if they say they don't listen to you, trust me, they listen to you. But if you're never having the conversations about sex and drugs and alcohol and gender and religion and faith and morals and values and this, that, and the other, or setting the example even on top of that, like, they're never going to know these things. They're going to fall, like I said, they're going to fall for anything, legitimately anything that sounds good. They're going to fall for it. And then they're going to be part of the numbers. They're going to be part of a protest that doesn't make sense. They're going to be in the streets doing something stupid, and you're like, "Why are you doing that?" "Well, they said I was accepted. This made sense to me. This is what I stand for." And then the next week they're standing for something else. The next week they're standing for something else. The next week they're standing for something else. And because they just keep falling for into the trick that
Yeah.
society
I think
wants
it's
them
very
to.
important to have a very solid foundation of belief inside the home, right? Because you live by those rules,
Mhm,
you share them with you act them instead of tell them. So now the kids learn from
mhm,
that activity. And it's so important to do that. It defines who they become eventually.
100%. And you have to be open as well at home. Like, you have to be open to
Yeah.
talk
Be
about
tolerant.
um, tolerance, and you have to be open to talk about politics. You have to be open to talk about that stuff. You have to be open to talk about, okay, this is what this side stands for. This is what this side stands for. This is where I am exactly on this issue. This is where your mom is on this issue, kind of thing. Honey, I don't know where you stand on this.
Yeah.
Where are you at on this issue? Kind of thing. Okay, you got to be able to have those conversations about those specific issues. Same with like gender and understanding there's people, you know, this is where I stand. This is where, our view on it as your mom and dad. You can make your own choice, but this is kind of where the values come from. This is why, from our faith or culture, blah, 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 down the
100%.
line. So it's important to have those
Yeah.
conversations to teach that thing. But also, you have to teach them tolerance, like you mentioned, to make sure that they're tolerant of other people. Because hate is bred, right? Hate is taught 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Hate's taught. Like I could teach my kids whatever I want. If I want to teach them hate, it's real easy. You teach your kids hate, it's real easy. And maybe you're teaching them it
Yeah.
without
By
even
our own
knowing it.
activities.
But you could be teaching them by bias or unconscious bias, or the way you act, the way you interact, the way you talk, the way you avoid people at the store. You know, if I saw you, Junaid, and I, for some reason had some unconscious bias, that'd be really easy to pass for my kids. Like, oh, we're gonna go this other way. I could clearly look at you, make eye contact with you, and then turn down the other aisle at
Yeah.
Walmart and be on my happy merry way. My kids will pick up on that. It's like, why are we avoiding Junaid? Like that's weird. He
Yeah.
looks like a nice guy. Oh well, just because Junaid's a little weird. Trust me, I talked to him on the podcast, but no, but it's like it's
It
very
is.
easy to
Yeah.
pass those things to your children without even realizing it. Very easy.
I love that. Yeah. Having that moral
But
upbringing, having that drive within yourself. And so, where do we learn those positive things? Well, here's a really clean and simple example. We're dads. We're out there working in the yard. We're cooking some food. How do you clean your hands? We go put it in clean water. But why won't we clean our hands with dirty water? It's not going to work. Same like we use clean water to clean our hands of dirt and flour and oil or whatever. We need to do the same thing for our minds, meaning reading the right books, hanging out with the right type of people, hanging out with the people with a growth mindset, having conversations like this with other growth mindset, open-minded individuals, heart-centered leaders. When you start picking the people, because sure, you can't pick who your family is, but you can totally pick who your friends are. So if you need to fire some friends and bring on some new ones to make sure that you're on that positive path, sometimes you got to do the hard choice. Sometimes you got to do it. But that's the blueprint to success. That's the blueprint to a positive mindset. I think it was 2003. I was driving. I was traveling for work. It was 3 a.m. and I had the TV on, and there's an infomercial came up. This guy is so full of energy running across the stage. Like, dude, what is going on? And I saw the number come up. I called up the number. I was like, I need what this guys have. and it was Tony Robbins. So I bought his CDs, and I would listen to those CDs talking about personal power. And I was like, why? I want to grow my business. What does it have to do with my personal power? And obviously, your business is an extension of who you are. If you are somebody of strong will and strong passion, guess what your company is going to be? It's going to be the same thing. So when we fix the man in the mirror, like quoting Michael Jackson's song, right? When you fix the man in the mirror, guess what? Everything else around you is going to change and be better.
100%. It's interesting. I was listening to a podcast just yesterday, before recording this, and I'm pretty sure it was PBD talking to Ice Cube. And PBD mentioned that in the early 90s, or maybe it was post 80s, maybe it was late 90s, sometime around them, or maybe it was early 2000s actually. I don't remember exactly, don't quote me on this, but during that interview, he mentioned how he had to put down hip hop. He had to put it down because he noticed that it changed how he acted. It changed how he reacted. It changed how he would talk. It changed how he would carry himself. And he was in business, getting into insurance, really trying to build his company, but it would change how he acted. So he had to shut it off, and he replaced it with books and audiobooks and things like that at that time because it just was changing how he was. And it speaks a lot, kind of exactly to your point that you said, like what you put in is what comes out. So if you're putting in, and there's nothing wrong with rap. I love me some rap. Like I listen to Eminem. I love the new album. Like I'll listen to like I listen to music, but it's really important like what you put in. So if you're always just putting in music just all day, well, you're going to regurgitate song lyrics and you're going to be looking up rap beef and you'll know everything about Kendrick and Drake that you can, and you'll be following it and you'll be fixated on all this stuff. And that's what you're going to be putting in because that's what you're starting with. You're feeding into that, and then that's what you put in more. That's what you go down. Or you go down these Taylor Swift rabbit holes and conspiracies because you put in Taylor Swift all the time. Or if you only put in sports, then you'll be able to regurgitate random sports facts like in 1981 on September 7th, blah, 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 blah. Or that'll happen. But if you're really trying to, so the point of all this is what you put in, you put out. So if you're putting in good, if you're putting in knowledge and information from quality podcasts, if you're putting in good knowledge from books, if you're putting in good knowledge from music that you are listening to that's going to uplift your soul, feed your soul, things like that. If you're putting all those good things in, well, there's no doubt that good things are going to come out. There's no doubt that good's going to come out. If you're putting in things that fuel you, that's what's going to come out into your family, into your work, into your business, into your day-to-day, into your interactions with your friends, your wives, your colleagues, your family, and everyone in between. But what's going to come out is exactly what you're putting in. And also the contrary, if you're doing nothing to fill yourself up, to fill your own cup, if you're doing nothing to change that man in the mirror, then nothing's going to change. And you'll feel like, well, why isn't anything changing? Because you're not doing anything to change. You have to make changes. If you want something to change, you have to change something. The definition of insanity,
Einstein,
I think by what Einstein, right, is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. If you're doing the same thing day in, day out, let's say you're feeling crappy about your body, but you're still consuming carbs and sugars and you're not exercising at all and you're barely getting 5,000 steps in a day and you're still feeling crappy and slow and lethargic and you're pounding 2-3 Red Bulls a day just to get through the day or 4 or 5 cups of coffee or whatever, then yeah, something's what do you think you can change there? Cut the sugar, cut the coffee down a little bit, force yourself through the hard part, and the hard part's okay. The hard part's going to be there. It's natural. It's okay. Change is hard, but it's worth it for how you're going to feel. You have to be willing to make these changes because if you're not willing to make these changes, then that's on you. Until you make those changes, nothing's going to change around you. Your environment's not going to change. Your relationship's not going to change. Your relationship with your kids ain't going to change. How successful you are in business isn't going to change until you start making those own personal changes with the man in the mirror.
Amen, man. There's an old term in software called garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah. And I mean, it's that simple.
Yep.
It's that simple. And if you're struggling in some way, shape, or form, and You have a religious belief like myself. I believe in God, Bible.
Amen.
You know, rely on your spiritual network. Go and pray. Ask to be if you can't figure it out on your own, ask. Ask and you'll find. You know, James 1:5. You know, go and seek. You know, he who asks
Exactly.
will be given to him. That's kind of a paraphrasing there, but James 1:5, 1:5 and 6, you know, says that he who lacks wisdom, let him ask with faith. And if you ask in faith and you ask for that wisdom, and you ask for that guidance, and you ask for that path to be shown to you, guess what? You'll be shown it. You'll be shown it 100% of the time. It may be in the way that you don't want 80% of the time, but that's the way that's best for you. You have to go through those doors. You have to open those doors. You have to walk. You have to get moving in the right direction, because if you don't, then you're going to be stuck exactly where you're at until you do. Nothing's going to change unless you change. You want a better relationship with your kids? Guess what? You got to start somewhere. You got to start with yourself. Because us as dads, we're shaping our future, the future generation, right? Like, it's interesting. Like, I was watching Bob's Burgers yesterday. I know, random thing to bring up here, but I love Bob's Burgers. Watching it, and it's an episode in season 14. And it's when Bob's dad takes the kids to the park, and the kids get stuck in the Clamstradamus thing, and it's a whole thing. It's a great episode. But the grandpa comes by, and Bob's already got the kids out of the little shack and whatnot. The grandpa comes by, and he's like, I am worried about the future, but my grandkids, they're the ones that give me hope for the future. They're the reason that I don't think it's all going to be that bad, really, that we're going to be okay, is because of the grandkids. And that, like, really hits Bob, like, whoa, like you guys go have fun with your grandpa. I'm gonna head back, kind of thing. And so it's just interesting how that works out, that little quote there. But, you know, our kids are the future. We have to remain hopeful. You know, as we shape our kids, we shape the future, and we have to shape kind, empathetic, loving, non-hateful, tolerant, accepting, you know, hardworking individuals is that we're all about.
I
So
love that. Thanks for sharing that episode. That makes so much sense, because
we have to.
We as individuals might think it's all going to go downhill. But I mean, when we look at our kids and their fresh minds, their innocent minds, oh my God, and the things that they do, it is exactly what gives us the hope that this world is null. You know, it's not going to go all downhill.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And please, the one thing I ask from, like, every single dad is to raise children with morals. Raise children that stand for something. Because I'm tired of seeing reports. I don't want to see any more reports that Gen Z is bringing their parents to interviews with them. You don't need any more of that. That's laughable. That a third of Gen Z is bringing their parents with them to job interviews. No. Let's raise our kids. Yeah, it's a fact. Like 33% of Gen Z brings their parents to job interviews with them. Yeah. Crazy. It's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. But we have to bring them up with morals, to care for other people, to take ownership for their actions, to take responsibility and be accountable and hardworking and all these things. Because, like I mentioned earlier, if they don't have that, if they don't leave home with that, then they're going to find it in other places, and it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be good and well. They're not going to be as successful as they can be. But they have to stand for something. They have to know what they stand for, how to stand for it, and know that they're unshakable in what they stand for. So please, that's like my biggest plea to dads is to, or anyone listening, is to please continue what you're doing, keep doing what you're doing. And if you're not raising them in with some kind of value system to stand for something, then please start. Start today. It's not too late. And if you don't even know where your values are, you know, I invite you to go to church, to pray, to explore that, to find someone spiritual. Lots of great people that have been on the podcast, different faiths, different sectors, to listen to them, reach out to them, to reach out to myself. I'll pray for you. I'll call you and I'll pray with you on the phone, whatever it is. I will help you start finding those things. I will help you find a congregation near you. whatever it is, find those values. It doesn't have to be faith, it doesn't have to be religion. Message me, I'll have that conversation with you, whatever it is. But we got to help each other find those values, those things that our kids are going to stand for. Because if our kids are standing for nothing, that's when it starts to crumble. That's where we start getting all these cracks. Let's shore up those cracks now so that the future, that foundation's even stronger for our country and for everything that we stand for.
Amen, man. Amen. Thanks for this opportunity, man.
And no, this has been awesome. Just to wrap up here, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I love what you said. We gotta stand for something, because if you don't stand for something, you're gonna stand for somebody else. If you don't stand for yourself, you're gonna stand for somebody else. If you don't have a plan, somebody else has a plan for you. I mean, there's a ton of quotes out there that talk about this, but the key to it all is you've got to know what you want and find the people who are going to help you get there. When I wanted to become a beekeeper for 6 months, I watched videos on YouTube because I was like, okay, we have the backyard, we can do the beekeeping. And I continually watched these videos till the last video. The guy said, hey, if you really want to become a beekeeper, you might want to go join a local beekeepers association. And I had no idea there was such a thing that existed. So I immediately found local beekeepers here in Virginia. The next week I was in their meeting, and the next month I was in class learning about beekeeping. So you got to find the community of people that are going to help you get there, right? To become a podcast, sure, I found this amazing app in Anchor that I can record my podcast. But it wasn't until I joined the community that people started sharing their questions and asking the questions that I had the answers for already. I was like, wow, if they're so curious into all of this, what's stopping me? Right? So find the community that's going to help you get there. And you're right, church is the number one place that you can go to learn about religion, to learn about moral positivity and whatnot. And if it's not the church, it might be the mosque, or it might be the synagogue. It might be a place where it lines up with your beliefs and helps you get there closer. Thanks so much for this opportunity, Jay.
100%, man. So let me wrap up here, and then I have one last question for you. Speaking of community, there's a Discord community I'm a part of. Podcast, there's 1,400 people in this Discord community. It's crazy. A little bit of everyone. So yeah, find your community that's going to help you. Another Discord, it's all dad podcasters, parent podcasters, unique and everything. So it's awesome how that's in there and everything. But to wrap up here, these beats that you're hearing at the beginning and end of podcasts that you've been hearing for a little bit now, these are all from the Podbeat app. Podbeat, Podbeat, fantastic. It takes your podcast listening to a new level. If you're someone that likes to work out, if you like to run, whatever you need to do to keep up the cadence, Podbeat has you covered. For audiobooks and for podcasts, you can turn it into a musical experience. Takes it to that next level. It's super simple to use. You open your podcast, hit play on your podcast, open Podbeat, find the beat that you want, lo-fi, trip hop, trap, EDM. Open on your phone, play that, overlays your podcast so that you can still listen to your podcast while listening to the beat to get a cadence up, to take it to that next level. So check out Podbeat wherever you get your apps for free. App Store, Apple App Store, Google Play Store. And then there is a subscription feature that's literally $3 to be able to get you full access to every beat that they have out, every beat that they have coming, and it's fantastic. So love Podbeat, love Nate and Joey who run it, fantastic couple. Go back and listen to their episode that came out on the podcast. Listen to them talk about it, get you fired up, makes you want to download it as well. So huge shout out to them, and also shout out to all of our other podcast sponsors that are in the description of the episode. Look at them, look them up, support the podcast, support them. We only work with brands that we support. So if we don't support them, then they're not in the link in the bio, as the kids say. So with that, Junaid, just last question here. Let's say a young father comes to you who is, I don't know, let's say he's 20 to 25 years old, super young, just had his first kid, scared out of his mind. He comes to you, he's like, Junaid, give me some lemonade here. I need some knowledge. I need something. I'm nervous. I'm scared. I'm freaking out over here, man. What's a couple, one or two pieces of advice that you would have for that young father?
Well, first I would ask him, which specifically area does he need help in? Right? As fathers, we have so many different areas: business, parenting, relationship with your wife, relationship with your in-laws. Which one is it? And I say, the more curious you are with the people that you want to help, the more questions you ask. Hey, how can I help? How can I be a better person? They will tell you exactly what they want from you. And if they're super nice and it's like, you're doing perfectly fine, then keep going that route, and you'll find a lot of joy. Because the problem that we all fall in is assuming that we have all the answers. So don't be afraid to ask questions of other people, and give yourself grace. Because as a new parent, you got to give yourself a break. You got to give yourself some grace, because guess what? Just like a newborn, you are a newborn dad. You got this.
And well, thank you for your time today. And the people can all find you on all social media platforms at Super Junaid, or Junaid. It's been great having you, man. Thank you to our listeners today for listening. Wherever you're listening at, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever else, do the thing that you can do to support the podcast. Like, follow, comment, share, leave a review, subscribe, all those things to show your love for the show. And Junaid, thanks for being on today. It's been a pleasure. And to our listeners, enjoy cleaning up the playroom, or don't. Leave it messy. It's okay. Make sure you clean the grill though. Go put the cover on. Pick up those lawn trimmings and enjoy the rest of your day. And we'll talk to you next time right here on the podcast.